The band is back together ahead of UFC Vegas 63. Sean Levine in Kansas City, Brendan Tobin down in Miami, myself, Jake Noacker in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. All three of us are here to bring you the best bets for this weekend's card. Main event, Calvin Kattar versus Arnold Allen. Boys, how you doing?
Isn't it technically Calvin effing Kattar, BT, when we had him on the show? Potty mouth old Calvin Kattar, but I like him.
Yeah, it's it was maybe the beginning and the end of tapped out there, because he swore a lot, but I also delight in that stuff. So I would always welcome him back as long as we record him.
Yeah, so I reached out to him for an interview this week. He didn't answer me. I was actually kind of grateful because I didn't want to deal with that. But don't worry, tapped out will be back in December. The word on the street is. Let's start with potty mouth Calvin Kattar going up against Arnold Allen. I just checked the odds on BetMGM. Calvin Kattar is a freaking plus 100 right now, underdog against Arnold Allen, minus 120. I've been saying for like a week, this for me is a dog or pass situation. Whoever's the underdog are going to have to bet, and it just happens to be Kattar, who I liked anyways. I think he's got the better boxing, a little bit more crisp, technical with it, if you will. Arnold Allen's got hands. He's very awkward and lanky in his style, clinch control and wrestling, but I just think Kattar's a step above him. I'm going to eat that underdog ticket. BT, do you agree?
Yeah, I do. Just because, first of all, I thought that he beat Emmett the last time around. Mm-hmm. I thought everybody thought, they were going to write him off against Giga. So I think that Calvin Kattar, like, this is his playpen. When people seem to overlook him, that's when he's at his best. I think Arnold Allen stepping onto a big stage here, having an event around him is always a questionable thing. Meanwhile, Calvin Kattar's kind of been like almost your non-champions, people's champion event. It's almost like kind of like the new Donald Cerrone in that regard. Yeah. So I like him. I just think he's too experienced. He's too good. He's been in there with some of the best. I think it's a big step up for Arnold Allen, and especially if you're getting Kattar as a dog.
Yeah, I don't like agreeing with both you guys, but I do more the way that Jake kind of broke down the skill sets of the fighters, and BT was talking about kind of the experience level. I mean, I'm looking at Arnold Allen, and yeah, the dude has been on an unbelievable winning streak, and I understand he's easy to promote and all those different things, but we're talking about wins against guys like Dan Hooker and Gilbert Melendez. I mean, and this is just in the last few years. So compared to Calvin Kattar, we know that guy, not only has he fought at the top of events, he's had the 5-round fights, but on top of that, he's fought the who's who. I mean, you look at his resume, and man, he's taken on all the dogs, albeit he hasn't beat them all, but he's gotten into the octagon with them. So if you want to talk about experience, and if you've heard him say levels to this game, we're about to find out what level Arnold Allen's at. I think we know, guys, where Calvin Kattar is. It's a very interesting clash of styles coming up on Saturday night.
The one thing I'd say with Calvin that I hope to see more is, like, he very is in love with his boxing, almost to the point where, like, he's so skilled that, like, he almost loves to live behind his jab. And I just feel like if he could just let himself go a little bit more, if he sees those openings, I think that would be almost like the next level into taking him to another level. If he can almost unleash that killer, because we know he could take a beating. We know that he could bust up somebody's face, but I think just executing, the finishing job in these fights, is probably what's separating him from being a really good contender to a champion.
Yeah, and I mean, when we've seen Arnold get hit in the UFC, specifically his last fight against Dan Hooker, he hits back. It's not like he's going to huddle up, wait for his moment, and then go back to technical striking. I think if he puts it on Kattar, or if Kattar puts it on him, I think there's going to be an extreme firefight, and I think Kattar wins that. We saw Allen get clipped in his last fight against Hooker, albeit that he won. I just like the odds here on Kattar. I think he's better all around. I think if a firefight does happen, then Boston elbows are a problem. I forgot to start the show with this. You're talking about levels to this game. Let's go back a week real quick. Talk UFC 280 this past weekend. Levels to this game. I was wrong about Charles Oliveira. Islam Makhachev proved me wrong. There are levels to this game. New champion. Sean, what do you think of 280 as a card?
What's crazy is I remember when the fight kind of looked like it was going to happen. We're talking about BT probably 3 or 4 months ago, and there was kind of some rumblings of it. And then I remember saying on the show, if these guys end up getting in the octagon, Charles is going to be the underdog. And that ended up coming to fruition. I was shocked that he was a 2-1 underdog. That didn't make any sense. So I'll admit I was the sucker that on fight night, I was like, all right, even though I said that I think that Islam's the better fighter, and I thought that Islam would be the favorite coming into it, and I don't really see a direct method. Charles can obviously win anyway. He's proven that in his last handful of fights. But, the whole question with Islam, we were just talking about, the levels and the competition. He had never fought a top 10 fighter, and all of a sudden he's getting in there with Charles Oliveira, who is getting Khabib comparisons all of a sudden.
Yeah.
I'm very surprised that he was as dominant as he was. I'll say that, right? Like, it seems like Charles Oliveira, in every single one of the fights that he's been in that we can think of, at some point, and it's usually really early on, I don't know if he's a slow starter, but he either gets put down or it's like, oh my gosh, he's in trouble. And then all of a sudden, he's not. And when he's not, it's over. It's almost like when Charles Oliveira takes control of a fight, he's proven that it's over. He didn't BT, not at one point in that fight when I said Charles Oliveira had any sort of control. That's what surprised me the most. Is it was completely dominant by Islam, which makes me think if he's that good against Charles Oliveira, dude, who beats that guy?
Yeah, I think that's the thing that was impressive to see with Islam more than anything. And I think, honestly, what my big overreaction was to it is I think you could probably say with the raw skills, like I could see arguments for why people think he can now be better than Khabib because his wrestling is so good, but his striking also seems a lot better than Khabib's did.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe if you would just say who's the pure better grappler, okay, you would go Khabib. But if you were to just outweigh almost like a two-way player in the NBA, like Islam's got it all. And because people are going to be so scared of him, we saw he was able to unleash that. And Charles, who you think about the guys that he did outstrike and take beatings from, was, had so many things to think about that he was taken out easily by Islam. And yeah, like I think we're always in this game. That's always an interesting battle that we play in the sport is because you never do it until we see you do it, or we never think you can do it until we see you do it. And I think that the arguments against Islam were fair and sound because we hadn't seen him in there with a top 5 guy, even though we all acknowledge the skill set. But to see him, go through Oliveira so easily after making it seem like Oliveira was just pulling wins against everybody, and knowing how good that division is, yeah, man, I don't know who's going to take out this guy because it doesn't seem like there's stylistically, I like, him versus Volkan, versus Alexander
Volkanovski.
I don't know. Volkanovski, excuse me. I was going to get it right eventually. Him against
Ozdemir, whoever.
Yeah, whatever. The Australian dude. He, I don't know, man. Like, I know Volkanovski gets disrespected in his own way too, especially with people really not being convinced he beat Max till he had to beat him 3 times. But yeah. I think that's a tough day at the office for him.
No, I agree. And Islam shut me up. He proved me wrong and fully earned my respect. Still, I love Charlie Olives, but yeah, all respect to Islam. Rest of the card, Aljo beat TJ. Not much of a shocker, especially when you hear he dislocated his shoulder 3,000 times. What's up, BT?
Yeah, how do you guys feel about this? Because I feel like as a gambling show, because Manny Pacquiao got in trouble for this. I don't know if you guys remember the class action lawsuit that he faced, but like, how do you feel the idea? Like, do you look at that as, a warrior mentality from TJ because he's fighting through something and he obviously doesn't want to lose the payday? He's already got a lot of scrutiny under this. Or like, do you feel screwed in a way as a fan because he's damaged goods going in there and just doesn't want to lose the money? But he has no shot. Like, you have no shot at beating Aljamain Sterling with one arm.
It's so shady. I don't have a problem with it because I had my money on Aljamain Sterling. So as soon as I saw TJ's shoulder pop, I was like, that's probably a direct path to my bank account. So whatever. But the fact that right after the fight, he takes the microphone and admits to the injury, it just feels slimy. It's like I couldn't have gotten it. Almost something has to change there. And the problem is more, they say don't hate the player, hate the game. The problem is the game. Like, how can you hate the player? How can you hate TJ Dillashaw for going out there, having the warrior mentality, wanting to get paid, thinking that he could win just with one arm, trying to get his belt back, like giving up that opportunity? That's what would be crazy if TJ didn't do that. So I don't blame him. But from a gambler's perspective, not having that information, think about how strict other sports are. And you can get fined for it, especially the NFL, where, and this is a much more direct path to victory. Like in the NFL, if you told me that, let's just say, for example, if Travis Kelce was out of a game, okay, well, now I know that Mahomes isn't going to have as many weapons, but the Chiefs still have a good chance to beat anybody out there. If you told me that one of the fighters only had one of his arms, that completely changes everything. Like, if I would have known that, his chances of going into that fight and winning were like 10%. So something has to change with that. I don't know what it is, but, and also, if I'm Dana, I'm pissed that TJ grabbed the microphone right after and revealed. That's inside. It feels like insider trading,
yeah,
doesn't it?
And I mean, Dana was pissed at the press conference afterwards. He was pissed. He didn't mention that specifically, but I have a feeling that's what irked him. Because yeah, I mean, it's TJ Dillashaw. All respect to TJ as a warrior. Sure, that mentality's there, but like both you said, yeah, something's got to change there. That's not right for the bookies or the fans.
And I think the thing that's interesting about it is like they spent all these time drug testing these guys.
Right.
Now, I think that the slippery slope we talk about here is they don't, the UFC has a very good financial pyramid here to keep their margins the way that they are. But in reality, like, I think as fans and events, like, okay, why can't these guys have mid-camp check-ins? Why can't these guys be seen by doctors that is under the UFC's billing? Because if something were to happen, now these guys really only have, I believe the only way that they're covered is if they get injured in a fight.
Yep.
And so you think about something like this, an event as big as Abu Dhabi, all the money that they're throwing at it. You're telling me nobody wanted to check in on TJ Dillashaw and say, hey, his shoulder doesn't work. Maybe we should go and have him fight Jan or Sandhagen or whoever. It's the deepest division there is. At least you got a fair fight.
And I mean, it's not like it was a secret, Cub Swanson tweeted about it the day after, was like, yeah, it's true. I was in camp. It's like, come on, somebody, but whatever. Besides the point, Aljo took it. Still the bantamweight champ, even if it's 3 fights in a row of some questionable circumstances. But another fight that surprised me on the card, obviously, was Sugar Sean O'Malley beating Petr Yan. I mean, every single media member, all of us scored the fight for Petr Yan. I had a 30-27 Yan. I rewatched it. I changed it to 29-28 Yan. I don't even know if it was a robbery because it was such a close, exciting fight, and I gained so much respect for Sean. But Sean, what do you think of your boy Sean? Do you think he took that, or you don't like scorecards?
Same thing. I mean, same thing I said 2 minutes ago. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Like, how can anybody be mad at Sean opposed to the judges? I'm with you guys. I'm with the entire anybody that watched that fight that knows anything about the sport knows that Sean O'Malley did not win. I think Sean O'Malley himself was surprised that he heard his name called. That being said, we also know that there are certain guys that the promotion likes to push. And I think that it's a little naive to pretend like that didn't have anything to do with it. And I'm not suggesting that Dana told the judges to do anything or anything like that, but the judges are humans also. So I don't know exactly what happened. It's kind of hard to explain because I'm with you. I rewatched it. It was either 30-27 Yan or 29-28 Yan. It certainly was not Sean O'Malley by split decision. No. Again, I got paid on that. I ended up having Sean by decision. And I got to tell you guys, it's kind of because of the way it ultimately worked out. I thought to myself, if it's close at all, I feel like Sean's going to get the nod for whatever reason. And he did. So, again, I'm happy about it. But let's not pretend like Petr Yan didn't get completely screwed the way that thing worked out.
Yeah.
It's one of these things. Yeah, it's one of these things where it's like, I get people being mad, but I think honestly the better thing for the sport happened because Sean O'Malley getting a big time win and also kind of being controversial is good for it. Like him tweeting out today, like I did watch back the fight and I won. That's good. That's going to get people pissed off and it's going to get people interested in him. And props to him because nobody thought that he was ready for this fight. He was a big dog in this fight. I would say he kind of Nate Diaz'd it, right? Like he didn't win the fight technically on the scorecards, but he did have the moment of the fight and he did have the more damaging shot. Like if you asked, old school mentality, like, hey, these two guys just fought over 50 minutes, but who looks the better coming out of it? I mean, I thought, Sean did whoop up on Petr really, really bad in that third round. So I get it, but I wasn't upset as a fan because I think in a way, this is the better thing for the sport. I want to see Sean O'Malley in big time fights. And, we got to remember, like he has openly admitted that he's basically coasted on the quality of opponent because of his pay. And so this was a big step up and he's learning too. So it's one of those things where like, man, if this was a 5-round fight, maybe he does continue to get the better of it. And I don't know. I wasn't as outraged. I agree with you guys. I had a 29-28 for Petr, but I'm happy with it being Sean getting the nod, because greedily I want him as a fan and you know, commentator of the sport. Like, I want us to be able to talk about Sean O'Malley fighting Aljo for the belt.
And he was good. I mean, Sean was good.
Yeah.
Like, I was impressed with Sean. I remember before Bruce read the scorecards, I remember saying, okay, Sean lost, so he has to kind of work his way back up a little bit, a couple of more fights before a title now. But I don't think his stock dropped at all. I don't think anybody looks at him like a scrub. If anything, the odds makers are probably like, oh, damn, we shouldn't have made Sean that big of an underdog. He's legit. Everything that you said is true, BT. I mean, everybody wants to see Sean fight for the title. Now, it's crazy because I remember talking just like, feels like a couple of months ago with you guys, and we were comparing Sean's chances of fighting for a title with Patty's chances of fighting for a title. And it felt like they were both pretty damn far away. Like, something had to work out absolutely perfect. And then the whole calling out Petr Yan thing, him accepting the fight, like, Yan, let's call it what it is. He didn't have a ton to gain in that fight, besides the shut up, I guess, the hype train that was Sean O'Malley. But personally, I mean, he's already, you know, you've already held the belt. You're the number one contender. And now you're fighting a guy, or at least higher ranked. And now you're fighting a guy in Sean O'Malley who's trying to take everything that you have, and essentially did. I mean,
yeah, I mean, like, how many times do you see a guy jump up 10 spots in the rank?
It's crazy. It's crazy.
That's
and
pretty
now,
wild.
now Sean, and now they've got their chance to let him fight for the belt. I mean, Dana said beforehand, and we know that what Dana says doesn't always come to fruition after the fights, but he said that whoever won that fight, Yan O'Malley, was going to fight the winner of Aljo Sterling. So in theory, there shouldn't be too much conversation. If Dana's word is true, it should be Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley for the belt. And then I want to ask you guys, what do the odds look like in that fight? Because everybody's going to the window, including us three, wanting to bet Sean O'Malley. So it's like, what are we talking about? It's not going to be a pick 'em. Sean's an underdog again, right?
Yeah, I would think Sean comes in underdog. I for whatever reason, Aljo minus 235 is the number that's in my head. So that's what I'm going with. Sean plus 210, plus 250, something like that.
I think the only guy, you know, you look at that top 5 right now who's got to be laughing at all this has got to be Cheeto, because, like, it is funny that everybody's here coronating Sean O'Malley for beating Yan, but I mean, he beat Sean O'Malley and he's been head kicking everybody to hell that he steps in that cage with. So I would say he's probably the only guy that has the argument. I mean, Marab does, but I mean, they're friends. They're not going to fight. So I guess we can throw that out right now.
Right.
But Cheeto's got to be thinking, like, I was the Sugar Show Slayer immediately. And now everybody's giving him this ride for a controversial win. Meanwhile, I'm like obliterating everybody I get in the cage with. So I would say he's in the top 5 right now. He's got to be the guy who can raise his hand. But I'm in agreement that I think that it's probably going to end up being Sugar fighting for the title, because that's what's good for business.
Well, maybe both things can happen, right? Like, let's say Sugar fights, Aljo wins, and then all of a sudden you've got Cheeto Vera, who's still sitting there as a number 1 contender. And then that rematch becomes a huge fight. Because the first time around, it's crazy. We all knew who Sean was, and Cheeto Vera was just kind of this journeyman, right? Like, he'd been in the promotion for a while. He won some fights. He had lost some fights. And then when he won that one, it kind of felt like, okay, you know, Sean didn't have the best night. And then all Cheeto Vera's done since then, like you said, is just beat the hell out of literally has beat up every single person he's fought since then. So he definitely deserves a shot at the title. It's just curious to see how the UFC is going to end up doing it. Where are we going to see Aljo fight O'Malley now? Or maybe they'll just let Cheeto fight O'Malley next, and the winner of that one fights Aljamain Sterling. So they definitely have some options.
I think the move is Sean versus Cheeto, fight for the title. Maybe Henry Cejudo comes back in the meantime and plays with Aljo. I don't know.
The problem with that, though, Jake, the problem with that, though, is we all know the promotion really wants Sean to have the belt. And now's the time when you don't have to rationalize it. I mean, you said ahead of time whoever wins this, and he won. So now, Sean is one fight away from winning the belt, which is the best thing this is Conor McGregor part 2, guys. Like, that's
Say
the
less,
best
man.
possible thing that could happen to the UFC. So putting him against Cheeto right now is a little bit foolish, because frankly, I think Cheeto will win that fight again. Yeah. And if he did, then you don't get O'Malley for the belt right away. So, like, they need to have Sean fight for the belt right now. They'd be crazy not to.
I may think the fight is Cheeto versus Sean. That might be the fight to make, but I'm a Sugar Show boy. I'm for Sean getting a title shot all day. I would love if he went in there and beat up Aljo, but we'll see, man. The bantamweight division is stacked, and it's not going anywhere. I do want to move on and talk about UFC Vegas 63. We're going to take a step down in competition and excitement now, because it's not the best card, and we already talked about the main event. 2 more fights I want to mention. Co-main event. No, it's not even the co-main event. I think it's a prelim fight, but it's my co-main event. Andrei Arlovsky coming back, UFC legend, opening as a plus 200 underdog. BT's already shaking his head, going up against Alima as a minus 250
Not negatively.
favorite.
I just can't believe he's still fighting. It's
He's 43 years old, 80 years combined age between these two. Delima's 37. I'm still going with Arlovsky, the underdog, 2-1 dog. You kidding me? 6-0 or 6-1 in his last 7 fights as a 43-year-old man. Still showing the striking prowess, showing the chin, showing the clinch control and the grappling. I have no idea why Delima is such a big favorite, but Arlovsky all day.
Yeah, I agree. Like this, like it feels like he's going to be 53 and still be winning decisions. They'll be on some 4-fight win streak in the heavyweight division because I don't know. He just seems what he does. Like he'll lose one eventually, probably to like a top guy, and then like he'll go back and they'll start putting him as a gatekeeper again, and he'll go on another run.
I can't believe Andrei Arlovsky's still in the UFC, let alone still winning in the UFC. Like you mentioned, he's won, what do you say, 6 of 7. You look at his losses too, like they're to dudes. He lost to Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He lost to my guy, Tom Aspinall. Nothing to be shamed about in those losses. And if he wins coming up on Saturday night, that's 5 in a row. And then what happens? So I'm with you guys. Clean sweep. Like I like Arlovsky, especially with the underdog money. And he's proven that he can now beat you like in his old age in a bunch of different ways. I love this fight.
Yeah, and it's not like Delima's a 24-year-old, 27-year-old. He's 37
No, he's
years
old too.
Yeah. So, I mean, hey, I think Arlovsky and Cater both. I mean, as long as they stay underdogs, you hit them. And I think those lines close. So maybe hit them now. There's no way Calvin Cater is a plus 100 come fight night. But yeah, maybe he will be because Arnold Allen's no joke. Moving on down the line here. Maybe this is the co-main event. I don't know how this card's set up, but Dustin Jacoby, this is the last fight I want to talk about for this card. And then we'll talk some more nonsense next. But Dustin Jacoby opening as a minus 175 favorite over Khalil Roundtree as a plus 145 underdog. This might be an underdog situation. I feel like maybe at least one of you two likes. I do not. I'm all over the favorite Dustin Jacoby here. Huge fighter, big size. His second stint in the UFC, 6-0-1. His past 7 fights. Very impressive resume and record right there. And he's looked great doing it too. He's showing great durability, great chin. His striking has been super crisp, great distance control and pace. And I mean, his wrestling and cage control on top of that has been top notch. You go to the other side, Khalil Roundtree, as much as I love him and as great as a fighter as he is, he really, especially as of late, has been relying on like that one big punch, that one big kick to the leg, the oblique, that one big like flurry. He's been very slow. He hasn't been very active until he gets active and gets the finish. I don't think Dustin Jacoby is a fighter you can go in there with that style against. Sean Levine, do you agree?
I do agree. And it's more, do you want to see the highlight or do you want to get paid? Like, I think that if Jacoby wins, Jacoby's got a lot of different ways to win this fight. And we talk about Khalil Roundtree, and it's not just of recent when you want to talk about that one-hitter quitter, that highlight. He's been doing that for a long time now. So can Roundtree pull that off on Saturday night? Sure, I'd be surprised. I'm putting my money on Jacoby to end up winning. And then, look, this one also, if you made me bet inside the distance, that's a tricky one.
Yeah,
I think Jacoby's got a lot of different ways to finish him. I think I'm taking Jacoby by finish on Saturday night.
Ooh, BT?
I like Roundtree. I'm a Roundtree fan. And I think one of the things, you mentioned Jacoby's height, but like immediately I did go to, Roundtree just starting to work on that lower body and just starting to destroy it. And, he's got some of those wicked kicks, man, training in Thailand and all that stuff. He's an absolute beast with that. So I'll take some value on the vet. I think he can get it done.
I don't hate the underdog ticket on Roundtree here. I'm not going to be betting a lot on Jacoby. I think this is an exciting fight regardless. And I mean, if Roundtree wins, I see him winning by a vicious knockout of some sort. So I'm always down to watch that as a fan. But BT, I got to ask you, because the last thing I wanted to talk about with our time together today is a circus fight that is happening this weekend. Maybe because apparently one of the fighters got knocked out twice in training, but your best friend, Jake Paul, is taking on the legend Anderson Silva. Why is this happening? What's going to happen in this fight if it happens?
Why is this happening? I mean, it's happening because Jake Paul needs an interesting fight, and he is smartly finally going away from trying to fight boxers that nobody cares about, like Asim Rockman's son and Tommy Fury and all that stuff. So he's going back, I think, to his wheelhouse of fighting MMA legends. The only thing that's strange about this one, and I think that he's kind of misstepping on, is once again, it's kind of it's a friendly week. They're having dance offs. It's very nice between everybody. And, I don't know about this whole Jake Paul fighting thing anymore, guys. Like, I'll watch. Obviously, I'm going to tune into the circus tent. But like, I think if I didn't do this, I wouldn't, just because I don't know how much the genuine public cares about Jake Paul getting in there with, a guy of Anderson Silva and them kind of being nice to each other. Like,
yeah.
It just doesn't seem like, I don't feel like it's had the same buzz this week. Maybe it will, come later in the week when there's weigh-ins and shoves and all that type of stuff. But, I will say, as far as guys he's taken on, it's the most credible because Anderson Silva, has boxed. He has a professional boxing record. He wanted to box Roy Jones for the longest time. I did see him knock out Tito Ortiz at the Evander Holyfield fight ringside of that. That was really sad, but it was enjoyable to see Tito Ortiz plummet into the ring post.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would take Anderson Silva as the dog in this because I feel like if this is a legit fight, which a lot of people don't think that it is, people think that Anderson's going to take a dive. But let's just say it was on the level, like he's got the skill set that I think could beat Jake Paul.
As you were talking, I was thinking about like the path of Jake Paul's boxing career. It has been a weird one where like you're fighting like, former slam dunk champion NBA players, and then you're fighting MMA fighters who had absolutely no boxing skills. And then you're fighting a guy in Tyron Woodley who hasn't won a round since like the Nixon administration. And then you're talking about not fighting Hasim Rahman, but his son. And then you're not fighting, like you're fighting the other Fury from Love Island. Like it's been a weird run. This feels, I guess the most legit, like only because we've seen Anderson Silva in the last calendar year in boxing matches, and his hands look pretty legit, especially compared to all these other guys that he's fought against. But also, how old is Anderson Silva? Jake Paul's a young buck. Like we're talking about one guy who's
47.
So mid-20s versus late 40s. And I know there's something to that dad strength. BT can tell you all about that, but also there's something to hitting your peak and then starting to decline. Like, let's not pretend like this is Anderson Silva that was fighting Chael Sonnen, 7 or 8 years ago, where he, his quick twitch muscles were, what they were in his 20s and 30s. So name value, I guess it makes some sense. But I think Jake Paul knocks him out, man. I don't see this any different from any of these other guys. Like, I think it's probably going to be a little bit of a dance off for the first few rounds, kind of like we saw with Tyron Woodley the second time around, until all of a sudden he puts his lights out. So I don't know if that's Jake Paul showmanship, or I don't know if that's, trying to make the fight last as long as it possibly can, or if it just took Jake Paul that long to figure him out. But I don't see Anderson Silva, this version of Anderson Silva, that different from all the other guys that have got knocked out by Jake Paul.
I just think that the train after this is like, okay, we get it. You're taking on Washington MMA guys. And I'm not these guys. I don't want to see Jake Paul necessarily beat a boxer because I don't care about Jake Paul being a good boxer. But I think that he's got to go in some kind of a direction of, it's either got to be against somebody who's going to give him a little bit of adversity, and there's going to be a hostile buildup like a Nate Diaz or something like that. Like, there's got to be some conflict in the lead up to it.
Isn't it pretty freaking obvious who this guy needs to fight next if he wins? Like, I know you and I talked about this for a minute, and I believe your words to me were, "Shut up, that's foolish, BT." He needs to fight Mike Tyson. Like, Mike Tyson, listen, hear me out real quick. Mike Tyson is a guy who, is he older or younger than Anderson Silva?
He's older. He's like 54.
Yeah.
Dang, is he 54?
Yes.
Yeah. Is he 54?
Yeah, he's old as hell. Like, what are you talking about?
Okay, what are the odds? What are the odds in that fight if it goes down? Full training for both of them.
I would guess Jake Paul's probably the favorite too.
Okay, so you're saying I would guess, and Jake's over there going, I don't know. Doesn't that inherently make it a really good fight? Like, it's
Mike
not
Tyson's
an uneven
56.
matchup.
Mike Tyson was getting wheeled through an airport in Miami 4 weeks ago. What are we talking about? The guy can barely stay awake.
You don't think Mike Tyson would have a shot against Jake Paul? Are you nuts?
I just don't want, like, what is, like, he did his thing. He did the one send off against Roy Jones. We were like, cool, man. It was great. And it legitimately, that was the where Jake Paul blew up on that card, because it did business. Not because of Jake Paul, because of Mike Tyson. Like, he's one of the, like, take of his resume what you want, but he's one of the most hallowed names in the sport. No, he doesn't have to fight Jake Paul.
No. He doesn't have to fight him. No, he doesn't. I'm not saying he has to fight him. I'm saying from somebody like me, a fan's perspective, what would be the next step up in competition? I mean, I don't think that he's ready to jump all of a sudden up against top 5 actual boxers, guys that do that for a living. I think he either has to go up against an MMA fighter like we've seen, whereas in the case of Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley, retired MMA fighters, or you can go up against a boxer that's not really the dude in like a guy like a Tommy Fury or a Hasim Rahman Jr. I don't know. It just seems like if you're going to take on an old guy and you're going to take on an old retired guy that used to be a pretty damn good boxer in his day, who wouldn't want to see it? That's the one that everybody would be interested in.
I don't know if I want to see that or not, and I don't want to have to find.
Would you watch?
Would you? Of course, I would watch, Sean. Of course, I would watch.
Isn't that the whole point, though?
But like, I wouldn't pay for it.
See it.
But I'm watching this weekend.
Watch?
I'm watching this weekend too, though. Like our standard for would you watch is a lot lower than everybody else's.
It's
don't
very
you think
low.
That everybody though? I think it has to pass like the girlfriend wife threshold. Like
I don't think you're wrong. I think it would mainstream.
Sure.
I think yes, it's obviously going to be Stephen A is going to be talking about it. Yes, it'll obviously get a lot of buzz.
So,
my question though is like, should you have Mike Tyson be getting in the ring with a 25-year-old, even if he has greater boxing skill? No, probably not. It's like having, eventually it has its limit, and I just think that eventually
y'all are scared. Y'all are scary.
Y'all.
You guys sound like two guys that are afraid to see Jake Paul, the Disney YouTube kid, knock out the great Mike Tyson. You've got his picture on your wall.
54.
56. Okay. And let me explain.
56.
Let me explain, because my Zoom time is running out because I'm cheap and I don't pay for the full thing. I would be the only 25-year-old in the world I would want to see Mike Tyson fight, because he would knock me out, and I don't want to see any other 25-year-old knock out any more of my childhood heroes, because we're going to see it happen this weekend. I cashed Jake Paul's at plus 100 underdog. That's disgusting. Wow. Disgusting.
Jake Paul's going to knock him out.
It's going to be sad, and I hope he doesn't get Tyson next. That would be the circus main event, so to speak. But boys, thank you both very much for joining me. It was great to see you and talk some fights. We'll do it again soon, and let's go underdog. Calvin Cater.